What if I told you the asteroid missed? Welcome to What If Horizons, the podcast that takes your wildest hypotheticals and runs with them until we're all out of breath. Today, we're tackling a question that's been lurking in the back of every dinosaur lover's mind. What if those giant lizards hadn't just survived, but gotten smart? Picture this. 66 million years ago, the universe flinches. The asteroid that was supposed to wipe out the dinosaurs whiffs. A cosmic curveball. It sails past Earth like a bad pitch, leaving nothing but a confused T-Rex squinting at the sky, wondering if it should duck. And just like that, evolution gets a second chance. Fast forward a few million years. The dinosaurs aren't just alive, they're thriving. And not just as bigger, meaner versions of themselves. No, we're talking full-blown, problem-solving, tool-using. What's the square root of this Dinosaur intelligence? The age of reptiles doesn't end. It upgrades. Now, before you imagine velociraptors in lab coats though, let's be honest, that's coming. Let's talk about how this even happens. Intelligence isn't some magic trait that just pops up because evolution got bored. It needs pressure, a reason. For us mammals, it was probably hiding from things that wanted to eat us while also figuring out how to eat each other. But dinosaurs, they were the things eating everyone else. So what changes? Maybe it's competition. Too many big predators, not enough prey. Suddenly, the smart ones, the ones who can plan their hunts, who remember which plants make you vomit, who realize, hey, maybe we shouldn't eat our own eggs, they're the ones who survive. Over time, brains trump brawn. The Jurassic jocks get outplayed by the nerds. Or maybe it's something weirder. Some dinosaurs were already shockingly clever. Troodontids had big brains for their size, and dromaeosaurs might have hunted in packs. Toss in a few million more years of fine-tuning, and who knows? Maybe we end up with a Triceratops writing poetry, a Stegosaurus doing stand-up, a T-Rex struggling to use chopsticks. And here's where it gets really weird. If dinosaurs got smart, would they ever make room for us? Or would the first human-like creatures to crawl out of the muck get immediately stomped into the fossil record by some highly evolved dino who just really hated mammals? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Next time, we'll dive into what dinosaur cities might look like. Spoiler: elevators are a nightmare when you've got a tail. Imagine waking up in a world where the morning commute involves dodging pterodactyl air traffic. Where roadside diners serve freshly grilled ferns with a side of roasted lizard, which is technically cannibalism but nobody talks about it. Welcome to Dinosauria. Population: very large and surprisingly well-read. The first thing we need to address about an intelligent dinosaur civilization is architecture. Humans build skyscrapers. Dinosaurs, they'd need tail scrapers. Picture a bustling metropolis designed for creatures with 20-foot tails. Sidewalks would be more like tail slides. Public transportation becomes interesting when half your passengers weigh 6 tons. You wouldn't just miss the bus, you'd watch helplessly as it tips over trying to accommodate one too many hadrosaurs. Their technology would face unique challenges. Developing opposable thumbs is overrated when you've got opposable teeth. A velociraptor smartphone might involve intricate byte-operated controls. Keyboard design gets problematic. Can you imagine a T-Rex trying to text with those tiny arms? Autocorrect would be a nightmare when your claws keep hitting multiple keys. Language and communication present another hurdle. Human speech developed with flexible lips and vocal cords. Dinosaur communication might rely more on elaborate crest displays, tail flicks, and the occasional earth-shaking bellow. Their version of sign language would probably cause minor earthquakes. Imagine being awakened every night by your hadrosaur neighbor's midnight mating call vibrating through your walls. Social structures would evolve differently too. Human hierarchies developed around strength, then wealth, then ideas. Dinosaur hierarchies might still be based heavily on size and crest coloration. Their corporate culture would be brutal, literally. The concept of eating the competition takes on new meaning when your CEO is a 30-foot carnivore. Corporate takeovers might involve actual swallowing. They'd face unique challenges in personal development too. Human teenagers go through awkward phases. Imagine an adolescent T-Rex dealing with disproportionate limb growth, cracking vocal sacs, and suddenly developing the urge to hunt while still being dependent on parents for food. The dinosaur version of goth phase would just be painting yourself darker colors and skulking near meteor craters. Education looks different when your average classroom contains predator and prey species. Recess would require careful supervision. Do you separate the carnivores from herbivores during lunch? Or just let natural selection handle attendance? Detention becomes significantly more dangerous when your teacher is legally allowed to eat students who act up. Even mundane activities change when you're dealing with dinosaur physiology. Ever tried to tip a cow? Now imagine tipping a brontosaurus because it won't move out of your driveway. Their version of online shopping would require reinforced porches. Delivery expected between 9 a.m. and never, because the delivery dino got hungry and ate your package along the way. They'd revolutionize sports. Baseball would be amazing when the ball is an actual boulder and the batters are swinging with their tails. Dinosaur soccer would just be herds of titanosaurs slowly rolling a giant stone toward each other's nets at geological speed. The Olympics would feature running, from predators jumping over lava, and competitive staring, waiting for prey to make a break for it. What about government? Human governments struggle with bureaucracy. Now imagine a theropod senate where everyone keeps trying to establish dominance by biting the podium. Democracy is harder when votes are determined by who can make themselves look biggest. Their political debates would literally be dick measuring contests, if they had any concept of pants that needed measuring. And let's not forget religion. Early human religions worship the sun and rain. Dinosaurs would probably worship bigger dinosaurs that might eat them unless placated. Their creation myth might involve a great cosmic egg that hatched everything, including their existential dread of more cosmic eggs falling from the sky. Next time you see a bird at your feeder, consider this. That's literally the closest living relative to what could have been dinosaur philosophers, dinosaur poets, dinosaur accountants. The only difference between a crow solving puzzles and a Utah raptor solving complex social equations is about 65 million years of what if. Let's talk about dinosaur art. Humans paint on cave walls. Dinosaurs would probably use their tails to carve intricate patterns into mountainsides. Their version of graffiti would involve whole cliff faces. Imagine a stegosaurus using its plates as a xylophone to create the first dinosaur symphony. The concept of performance art takes on new meaning when your artist might eat the audience. Their literature would face unique challenges. Writing implements are problematic when you have claws. Early dinosaur authors might have used their teeth to carve stories into tree trunks. The first dinosaur novel was probably just a single tree that took generations to finish. Their version of stream of consciousness writing would literally involve streams, where they carve words into riverbanks that get washed away by the next rain. Poetry in a dinosaur world would be less about rhyme and more about rhythm. The pounding of massive feet, the swish of tails, the deep resonant calls that make the ground tremble. Their haikus would be earth-shaking. Their sonnets would probably involve marking territory in iambic pentameter. Slam poetry competitions would require reinforced stages and liability waivers. Visual arts would develop differently too. Human artists use brushes. Dinosaurs might use their entire bodies to create massive land art visible from space. The first dinosaur Picasso would be a brachiosaurus that accidentally stepped in paint and left a trail across the landscape. Sculpture would involve moving boulders with their heads. Abstract art is easier when you can claim the boulder landed that way naturally. Music would be revolutionary. Humans have string and wind instruments. Dinosaurs would probably use their own bodies as instruments. The hollow crests of hadrosaurs could function as natural wind instruments. The clacking of jaws could become percussion. A T-Rex roar could be the bass in a prehistoric symphony. Their orchestras would require ear protection for miles around. Theater and performance arts would be interesting when your actors might actually eat each other on stage. The first dinosaur play was probably just a reenactment of a hunt that got too real. Their version of Shakespeare would involve a lot more biting. Improv comedy becomes dangerous when your performers might take yes, and as an invitation to attack. Dance would be fascinating. Humans have ballet. Dinosaurs would have tail ballet, where the dancers use their massive tails to create intricate patterns in the dirt. Their version of breakdancing would involve actual breaking of trees, rocks, and occasionally bones. Synchronized swimming is easier when you're already in water and have natural flippers. Cinema would face unique challenges. Camera equipment is difficult to operate with claws. The first dinosaur movie was probably just a herd running past a mud pit, accidentally capturing their own reflections. Their version of CGI would involve genetically engineering smaller dinosaurs to act as special effects. Action scenes would be easy to film since everything is already an action scene. Fashion in a dinosaur world would be less about clothing and more about natural ornamentation. The dinosaurs with the most colorful crests and scales would be the trendsetters. Their version of a fashion show would involve strutting around and occasionally eating the judges. Makeup would involve rolling in colored mud. Hairstyling is easier when you don't have hair, just scales to polish. Interior design would be challenging when your furniture needs to accommodate tails and massive bodies. The first dinosaur interior decorator was probably just a sauropod that realized ferns look nice in the corner. Their version of feng shui would involve arranging boulders to create the most efficient paths for tail swinging. Minimalism is easier when you can't accumulate much stuff without crushing it. Even something as simple as gardening changes when you're a dinosaur. Humans plant flowers. Dinosaurs would probably cultivate entire forests just by walking around and pooping seeds. Their version of bonsai would involve carefully nibbling trees into shape. Landscaping is easier when you can just knock over mountains to create the view you want. Next time you visit a museum, consider this. Every piece of art, every sculpture, every performance could have been completely different if dinosaurs had been the ones creating it. Their culture would be as massive and earth-shaking as their footsteps. And who knows, maybe in some alternate universe, there's a T-Rex curator explaining human cave paintings to a group of very confused velociraptors. Now let's dive into the scientific achievements of our hypothetical smart dinosaurs. Human science started with figuring out fire. Dinosaur science probably started with figuring out which plants make you hallucinate. Their version of the scientific method would involve a lot more trial and error, mostly because their error margin includes accidentally eaten by colleague. Physics would be interesting when your researchers weigh several tons. The first dinosaur to discover gravity was probably just a pterodactyl that fell out of a tree. Their version of Newton's apple would be a boulder that rolled down a hill and crushed someone's tail. Quantum mechanics is easier to understand when you can literally see the particles because your eyes are the size of dinner plates. Chemistry presents unique challenges. Humans use beakers and test tubes. Dinosaurs would probably use natural rock formations as their lab equipment. The first dinosaur chemist was likely just a curious ankylosaur that realized mixing certain muds made bubbles. Their periodic table would be carved into a mountainside, with elements added by headbutting new symbols into the rock. Biology would be fascinating. Humans study other species. Dinosaurs would study each other, and occasionally eat their subjects. The first dinosaur biologist was probably just a velociraptor that wondered why its prey tasted different depending on what they ate. Their version of Darwin would be a T-Rex that spent years observing smaller dinosaurs before realizing they were all related. Astronomy would be revolutionary. Humans use telescopes. Dinosaurs would probably use their natural height advantage. A brachiosaurus could see stars without any equipment. Their version of Galileo would be a stegosaurus that accidentally discovered Jupiter while looking for a snack. Space exploration is easier when your astronauts are already adapted to low-gravity environments because they're so massive. Medicine would face unique challenges. Human doctors use scalpels and needles. Dinosaur doctors would probably use their teeth and claws. The first dinosaur surgeon was likely just a triceratops that realized removing infected scales helped its herd mates heal. Their version of anesthesia would be getting hit on the head with a rock, not perfect, but effective. Engineering would be interesting when your engineers are the size of buildings. Humans build bridges. Dinosaurs would probably just walk across rivers and call it a day. The first dinosaur engineer was likely just a sauropod that realized stacking rocks made it easier to reach high leaves. Their version of skyscrapers would be mountains with carved-out living spaces. Technology development would be fascinating. Humans invented the wheel. Dinosaurs would probably just roll boulders down hills and call it innovation. The first dinosaur inventor was likely just a raptor that realized sharpened sticks could be used as tools. Their version of the internet would be a network of hollow trees used to send messages by drumming. Environmental science would be challenging. Humans study ecosystems. Dinosaurs would be part of the ecosystem they're studying. The first dinosaur environmentalist was likely just a hadrosaur that realized eating all the plants meant there was nothing left for tomorrow. Their version of conservation would involve not stepping on the same patch of ground twice in a row. Mathematics would be interesting when your calculators are your fingers and toes, or claws and scales. Humans developed algebra. Dinosaurs would probably develop geometry by figuring out the best angles for tail swings. The first dinosaur mathematician was likely just a T-Rex that realized counting its prey helped avoid overhunting. Their version of calculus would involve measuring the curves of their own bodies. Even something as simple as timekeeping changes when you're a dinosaur. Humans use clocks. Dinosaurs would probably use the position of the sun and the length of their shadows. The first dinosaur to invent the calendar was likely just a pterodactyl that realized tracking the seasons helped predict when fruit would be ripe. Their version of daylight saving time would involve moving mountains to block the sun next time you look at a scientific discovery. Consider this. It could have been completely different if dinosaurs had been the ones making it. Their science would be as massive and earth-shaking as their footsteps. And who knows? Maybe in some alternate universe, there's a T-Rex professor explaining human fire-making techniques to a group of very confused velociraptors. Let's talk about dinosaur politics. Human politics is messy. Dinosaur politics would be chaos. Imagine a parliamentary system where debates are settled by who can roar the loudest. The first dinosaur politician was probably just a triceratops that realized nodding its head made other dinosaurs agree with it. Their version of democracy would involve a lot of tail slapping to show approval. Elections in a dinosaur world would be interesting. Humans have campaign rallies. Dinosaurs would have campaign stampedes. The first dinosaur election was likely just a herd deciding which direction to run. Their version of a debate would involve two candidates standing on opposite sides of a clearing, trying to look bigger than each other. Campaign promises would include things like, "I'll make the trees taller," and "I'll personally fight the T-Rex that keeps eating our young." Political parties would be fascinating. Humans have liberals and conservatives. Dinosaurs would have the Leaf Eaters Party and the Meat Eaters Party, with a small but vocal faction of omnivores for change. The first political scandal was probably just a velociraptor caught eating from the wrong herd's territory. Their version of lobbying would involve leaving strategically placed carcasses outside the leader's cave. Leadership would be challenging. Humans have presidents and prime ministers. Dinosaurs would have alphas and betas, with occasional challenges to the throne that involve actual physical combat. The first dinosaur leader was likely just a T-Rex that realized if it roared loud enough, everyone else would do what it said. Their version of term limits would be, until someone bigger comes along. Law enforcement would be interesting. Humans have police. Dinosaurs would have enforcers that are just the biggest, meanest members of the herd. The first dinosaur law was probably just, "Don't eat the eggs." Their version of a trial would involve the accused standing in the middle of a circle while everyone else decided whether to bite them or not. Legal systems would be fascinating. Humans have courts and judges. Dinosaurs would have elders who remember all the past disputes and how they were settled. The first dinosaur lawyer was likely just a pterodactyl that realized if it squawked enough, it could confuse everyone into agreeing with it. Their version of a jury would be a random selection of herd members, most of whom are just there for the snacks. Diplomacy would be challenging. Humans have ambassadors and treaties. Dinosaurs would have scent marking and roaring contests. The first diplomatic mission was probably just a hadrosaur wandering into another herd's territory and hoping not to get eaten. Their version of a peace treaty would involve leaving a big pile of food in neutral territory and hoping everyone sticks to their side. International relations would be interesting. Humans have countries and borders. Dinosaurs would have territories marked by scent and claw marks on trees. The first international conflict was likely just two herds fighting over the same watering hole. Their version of a war would involve a lot of posturing, some tail slapping, and maybe a few bites here and there. Even something as simple as voting changes when you're a dinosaur. Humans use ballots and polling stations. Dinosaurs would use roars and tail slaps to show their preference. The first election result was probably just the loudest roar deciding the winner. Their version of voter fraud would involve sneaking into another herd's territory and roaring extra loud. Next time you watch a political debate, consider this: it could have been completely different if dinosaurs had been the ones running things. Their politics would be as massive and earth-shaking as their footsteps. And who knows, maybe in some alternate universe, there's a T-Rex president explaining human democracy to a group of very confused velociraptors. Now let's explore dinosaur economics. Human economies run on money. Dinosaur economies would run on Well, whatever wasn't running fast enough. The first dinosaur banker was probably just a raptor that realized hoarding shiny rocks made others bring it food. Their stock market would involve actual stocks, as in wooden posts to mark territory, and actual market, as in a clearing where they traded bites of prey. Currency in a dinosaur world presents unique challenges. Humans use coins and bills. Dinosaurs would likely use things they couldn't easily produce themselves: perfect teeth, rare feathers, or particularly tasty rocks. The first inflation crisis occurred when a clever pterodactyl discovered a cave full of shiny pebbles and suddenly everyone's nest decorations were worthless. Their version of cryptocurrency would be literal: bite marks on trees that only certain dinosaurs could verify. Labor markets would be fascinating. Humans have resumes and interviews. Dinosaurs would have size displays and tail-slapping contests. The first dinosaur job fair was probably just a clearing where herbivores showed off their digestion skills and carnivores demonstrated their biting technique. Their version of a union would be a herd agreeing not to work unless the alpha stopped eating random members. Real estate would be interesting when your property markers keep getting eaten. Humans have surveyors and property lines. Dinosaurs would have scent markers and the occasional pile of bones to mark territory. The first dinosaur realtor was likely just a stegosaurus that realized certain caves were more valuable if you didn't mention the T-Rex living next door. Their version of a mortgage would involve promising future kills to the current owner. Manufacturing faces unique challenges when your workers weigh several tons. Humans build factories. Dinosaurs would probably just knock over trees and call it raw material processing. The first assembly line was likely just a line of hadrosaurs passing leaves to each other until someone at the end got fed. Their version of quality control would be biting things to see if they broke. Retail would be revolutionary. Humans have stores. Dinosaurs would have trading pits where goods were exchanged amid much roaring and tail lashing. The first dinosaur shopping mall was probably just a particularly lush valley where different herds gathered to show off their wares. Their version of Black Friday would involve actual blackness, a solar eclipse during which all deals had to be made before the light returned. Agriculture looks different when your farmers are also potential fertilizer. Humans plant crops. Dinosaurs would probably just follow the seasons and eat whatever grew where they happened to be standing. The first dinosaur farmer was likely just a triceratops that realized not trampling all the plants meant more food later. Their version of crop rotation would be moving to a new valley every few months. Transportation infrastructure would be challenging. Humans build roads. Dinosaurs would probably just wear paths into the landscape with their constant movement. The first dinosaur traffic jam occurred when two herds met going opposite directions at a narrow pass. Their version of public transit would be riding on the backs of larger dinosaurs, whether they wanted passengers or not. Energy production would be fascinating. Humans use electricity. Dinosaurs would probably use muscle power and the occasional volcanic vent. The first power plant was likely just a hot spring where they cooked food. Their version of renewable energy would be waiting for fruit to fall from trees. Trade negotiations would be interesting when your diplomats might eat each other. Humans have trade agreements. Dinosaurs would have temporary truces where herbivores and carnivores exchanged goods without exchanging bites. The first international trade summit ended when someone realized the valuable goods being traded were actually another herd's young. Next time you check your bank account, consider this: financial systems could have been completely different if dinosaurs had been the ones inventing them. Their economics would be as direct and unsubtle as their hunting strategies. And who knows, maybe in some alternate universe, there's a velociraptor economist explaining human monetary policy to very confused T-Rexes. Let's dive into dinosaur education. Human schools have classrooms and teachers. Dinosaur schools would have open plains and elders who remember which plants make you sick. The first dinosaur teacher was probably just a hadrosaur that realized teaching others to find food meant less work for itself. Their version of recess would involve running from predators while practicing survival skills. Curriculum in a dinosaur world would be practical. Humans learn math and science. Dinosaurs would learn which berries are poisonous and how to outrun a T-Rex. The first dinosaur textbook was likely just a series of claw marks on a tree trunk showing where to find water. Their version of history class would be oral traditions passed down through generations, probably involving a lot of roaring for emphasis. Higher education would be fascinating. Humans have universities. Dinosaurs would have special caves where the wisest elders gathered to share knowledge. The first dinosaur professor was likely just a triceratops that realized sitting still and looking smart made others bring it food. Their version of a PhD would involve surviving 10 years without being eaten while making one significant contribution to herd knowledge. Graduation ceremonies would be interesting when your graduates might eat each other. Humans wear caps and gowns. Dinosaurs would probably just roll in colored mud to mark the occasion. The first dinosaur valedictorian was likely just a velociraptor that gave a stirring speech about the importance of teamwork before immediately abandoning its classmates during a predator attack. Sports in education would be intense. Humans have soccer and basketball. Dinosaurs would have tail-slapping contests and who can jump over a lava flow competitions. The first dinosaur coach was likely just a pterodactyl that realized organizing games kept the young ones from wandering into danger. Their version of a pep rally would involve a lot of roaring and maybe a few accidental injuries. Extracurricular activities would be challenging. Humans have drama club and debate team. Dinosaurs would have rock carving club and predator evasion squad. The first dinosaur art show was likely just a series of claw marks on a cave wall that everyone agreed looked nice. Their version of a science fair would involve demonstrating new ways to find food or avoid becoming food. Discipline in schools would be direct. Humans have detention and suspension. Dinosaurs would probably just bite troublemakers until they behaved. The first dinosaur principal was likely just a T-Rex that realized standing in the middle of the clearing and roaring occasionally kept everyone in line. Their version of a parent-teacher conference would involve explaining why their child got eaten during recess. Educational technology would be fascinating. Humans have computers and smart boards. Dinosaurs would have rocks and mud for writing, and maybe the occasional hollow log for drumming messages. The first dinosaur laptop was likely just a flat stone that they used to crush nuts while pretending to take notes. Their version of virtual learning would involve shouting across valleys to share knowledge. Even something as simple as homework changes when you're a dinosaur. Humans have worksheets and essays. Dinosaurs would have foraging assignments and predator evasion drills. The first dinosaur homework was likely just a list of plants to avoid eating, memorized through trial and error. Their version of a report card would involve claw marks indicating how well you could find food and avoid becoming food. Next time you visit a school, consider this: education could have been completely different if dinosaurs had been the ones inventing it. Their schools would be as practical and survival-focused as their daily lives. And who knows, maybe in some alternate universe, there's a Stegosaurus teacher explaining human algebra to very confused velociraptors. Let's examine dinosaur family life. Human families gather around dinner tables. Dinosaur families would gather around fresh kills or particularly lush patches of vegetation. The first dinosaur parent was probably just a hadrosaur that realized keeping its young close meant fewer got eaten. Their version of family game night would involve practicing predator evasion drills. Courtship rituals would be dramatic. Humans exchange flowers and chocolates. Dinosaurs would exchange freshly caught prey or particularly shiny rocks. The first dinosaur marriage proposal was likely just a male T-Rex dropping a dead ankylosaur at a female's feet and hoping she didn't bite his head off. Their version of a honeymoon would involve finding a secluded cave and not leaving until the female laid eggs. Childcare presents unique challenges when your toddlers can gut a man. Human parents use cribs and playpens. Dinosaur parents would use shallow pits and the occasional boulder to keep their young from wandering off. The first dinosaur babysitter was probably just a pterodactyl that realized watching the eggs meant it got to eat the leftovers. Their version of a diaper change would involve rolling the young in mud to keep them clean. Family meals would be interesting when your children might eat each other. Humans have dining tables. Dinosaurs would have designated feeding areas where the adults kept the young from fighting over scraps. The first dinosaur recipe was likely just a list of plants that didn't make you vomit, passed down through generations. Their version of dessert would involve finding a particularly sweet berry patch. Sibling rivalry takes on new meaning when your siblings might actually eat you. Human siblings fight over toys. Dinosaur siblings would fight over food and territory. The first dinosaur peacemaker was likely just a parent that realized separating the young meant fewer injuries. Their version of sharing would involve taking turns eating the same carcass. Extended family gatherings would be fascinating. Humans have family reunions. Dinosaurs would have herd gatherings where everyone showed off their young and compared hunting techniques. The first family photo was likely just a group of dinosaurs standing near a mud pit and looking at their reflections. Their version of a family tree would involve claw marks on a rock showing who was related to whom. Holidays would be challenging when your celebrations might attract predators. Humans have Christmas and Thanksgiving. Dinosaurs would have Migration Day and First Kill Day. The first holiday feast was likely just a particularly successful hunt where everyone got to eat their fill. Their version of gift-giving would involve leaving shiny rocks or bits of prey at each other's nests. Even something as simple as bedtime stories changes when you're a dinosaur. Humans read fairy tales. Dinosaurs would tell stories about the time Grandpa outran a T-Rex or how Auntie found the best berry patch. The first bedtime story was likely just a series of roars and tail slaps that meant, stay in the nest or you'll get eaten. Their version of a lullaby would be the sound of the herd settling down for the night. Next time you gather with your family, consider this: family life could have been completely different if dinosaurs had been the ones inventing it. Their families would be as practical and survival-focused as their daily lives. And who knows, maybe in some alternate universe, there's a Triceratops parent explaining human family dinners to very confused velociraptors. Let's explore dinosaur entertainment. Humans have movies and concerts. Dinosaurs would have stampede choreography and competitive roaring. The first dinosaur theater was likely just a clearing where performers reenacted famous hunts while audience members heckled with their own roars. Their version of a blockbuster would involve an especially dramatic retelling of That Time We Outran the Volcano. Music would be earth-shaking. Humans have orchestras with delicate instruments. Dinosaurs would have percussion sections consisting of tail slamming and jaw clacking. The first dinosaur pop star was probably a Parasaurolophus whose crest produced haunting melodies that made the whole herd emotional. Their version of a love song would be two theropods rhythmically gnashing their teeth at each other. Dance would be dangerous. Humans have ballet and hip-hop. Dinosaurs would have tail whipping and territorial display dances. The first dance competition ended when a particularly enthusiastic Stegosaurus accidentally impaled a judge with its tail spikes. Their version of breakdancing would involve actual broken bones, both the dancers and anyone standing too close. Sports would be brutal. Humans play football and basketball. Dinosaurs would play Don't Get Eaten and Who Can Knock Over the Biggest Rock. The first Dinosaur Olympics featured events like synchronized swimming for species that could swim and marathon running from predators. Their version of a gold medal would be the privilege of eating first at the next kill. Comedy would be dark. Humans tell jokes. Dinosaurs would tell stories about that one clumsy raptor that kept falling into its own traps. The first stand-up comic was likely a pterodactyl that realized mocking the alpha's mating display got laughs until it got eaten. Their version of a punchline would be an actual punch, usually delivered by a tail. Visual arts would be massive. Humans paint on canvases. Dinosaurs would carve entire cliff faces with their claws. The first art critic was probably just a T-Rex that stood back, squinted, and said, "I could have made that, about every piece." Their version of abstract art would be footprints in mud that vaguely resembled something if you tilted your head. Storytelling would be survival-based. Humans tell fairy tales. Dinosaurs would recount epic tales like how Grandma outsmarted the Megalodon, or the Great Drought of 23 million BC. The first novelist was likely a bored ankylosaur that spent too much time alone and started making up stories about talking ferns. Their version of a cliffhanger would be literally hanging from a cliff. Board games would be intense. Humans play chess and Monopoly. Dinosaurs would play Who Can Steal the Egg and Territory Dispute Simulator. The first game night ended when the alpha decided all the pieces looked tasty. Their version of a strategy guide would be claw marks showing which moves got previous players eaten. Even something as simple as toys changes when you're a dinosaur. Human children have dolls and action figures. Dinosaur young would play with bones and practice disemboweling practice prey. The first toy manufacturer was likely just a parent that realized giving the kids an old carcass to play with kept them from bothering the adults. Next time you watch a movie or attend a concert, consider this: entertainment could have been completely different if dinosaurs had been the ones inventing it. Their leisure activities would be as visceral and immediate as their survival instincts. And who knows, maybe in some alternate universe, there's a velociraptor film critic panning the latest human rom-com. Finally, Let's ponder the philosophical implications of intelligent dinosaurs. Humans ask, why are we here? Dinosaurs would probably ask, why is that T-Rex over there looking at me like that? The first dinosaur philosopher was likely just a stegosaurus that spent too much time staring at the stars and wondering if they were edible. Their version of existentialism would involve a lot of tail slapping and roaring into the void. Ethics would be straightforward. Humans debate moral dilemmas. Dinosaurs would have a simple code: don't eat your own kind unless you're really hungry. The first ethical debate ended when one side ate the other. Their version of a moral compass would be a literal compass made of bones, pointing toward the nearest food source. Religion would be fascinating. Humans worship gods and spirits. Dinosaurs would probably worship bigger dinosaurs that might eat them unless appeased. The first dinosaur priest was likely just a triceratops that realized wearing flowers on its horns made others bring it food. Their version of prayer would involve leaving offerings of meat or shiny rocks at the feet of particularly large boulders. Purpose and meaning would be survival-focused. Humans search for fulfillment. Dinosaurs would search for the next meal and a safe place to sleep. The first self-help book was likely just a series of claw marks on a tree trunk saying, run faster, eat smarter, avoid T-Rexes. Their version of a life coach would be an elder that survived long enough to give advice before getting eaten. Artistic expression would be primal. Humans create art to express emotions. Dinosaurs would create art to mark territory or attract mates. The first abstract thinker was probably just a pterodactyl that realized flying in circles made interesting patterns in the mud. Their version of a masterpiece would be a particularly large footprint that everyone agreed looked nice. Legacy would be physical. Humans build monuments. Dinosaurs would leave behind massive nests and carved landscapes. The first historian was likely just a hadrosaur that realized remembering where the best food was kept the herd alive. Their version of a time capsule would be a pile of bones buried under a rock. Even something as simple as death changes when you're a dinosaur. Humans have funerals and memorials. Dinosaurs would probably just eat the deceased and move on. The first funeral director was likely just a T-Rex that realized organizing the meal meant it got the best cuts. Their version of an obituary would be a series of roars recounting the deceased's greatest hunts. So, what does all this mean for us? If dinosaurs had evolved intelligence, the world would be unrecognizable. Their civilizations would be as massive and earth-shaking as their footsteps. And while we might not have existed in such a world, we can still marvel at the possibilities. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of intelligent dinosaurs, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to What If Horizons for more mind-bending explorations of the impossible. Your support helps us keep imagining the unimaginable. Until next time, keep asking, what if?